What's up, everybody? Welcome back to the show. And if you're watching me on YouTube, welcome back to the channel. You guys, the first vlog is officially up on my YouTube. This is a big deal. Okay. I worked really hard. I'm very proud of it. I'm very excited about it. So go watch it. Go hang out with me for like half an hour after you listen to this epic episode. It's basically like, imagine just like the two of us, couple gal pals getting ready. You're just hanging out with me for the day. I do my makeup, I pull some tarot. I show you some clips from my trip in Tulum and also tell you some secrets. And I feel like I'm going to be spending a lot of time on YouTube because I'm really enjoying creating video content after such a long time offline. Um, so, if you want to explore the world and grow with me on the platform, then subscribe to the channel so that we can create some epic shit together. All right. Now, for today's episode of the Girl Be Bold podcast, this feels a little bit like a niche episode. Okay. And when I say that, I mean, it might very well feel like you read the title, you listen, you watch this, and you know that this episode was for you. This is probably a conversation that you have been avoiding, right? Something that you might be sweeping under the rug for whatever reason, likely afraid of what's on the other side of this. But today we're going to be talking about outgrowing your relationships. All right. So we're going to talk about three different scenarios, three different types of relationships that you might be outgrowing, especially if you are like, personal development girly, a girly on her journey of, evolution and growth, and you're really out to create the best case life for yourself. We're also going to be talking about what to actually do about it. So believe it or not, I'm not just going to tell you to cut cords and run, even though that's always an option. We're going to talk about how to actually navigate the outgrowth. And then lastly, we're going to talk about 5 qualities that you absolutely have to look for in all relationships moving forward if you want them to be aligned, if you want them to give you energy, to give you the kind of fulfillment, the kind of nourishment that amazing relationships do. All right. So, if any of this is resonating, I feel like today's episode is probably going to be the exact conversation that you have been waiting for. All right. So, let's dive into the first section, the first category. All right. Love. Feeling like you are outgrowing your romantic relationship. So when I started working with women in leadership, women who have, successful businesses, the last thing I anticipated was to do so much like relationship coaching. Like I wasn't necessarily like turned off by it, but I definitely wasn't prepared for it because, I was coming from my dating and relationship background. So I have all of this like in my toolkit, but if we're sitting down talking about making, taking your 7-figure business into a multi 7-figure business, and all of a sudden the whole session becomes about your romantic partnership, like this started happening over and over and over again. And I realized how much of a common situation this is for women who are very dedicated to living their best lives, right? So feeling like you are outgrowing your relationships is oftentimes, well, first of all, let's just say it's not like a red flag right off the bat, especially if you've been together for a long time, because, relationships kind of move in this like out and in kind of motion because, believe it or not, independent of the actual relationship that you guys share, you're both individuals. So you both have your own individual paths in life, right? And when you're with someone for a long time, it's normal to kind of grow apart a little bit and then sometimes come back to each other. And you kind of go through these waves as you evolve independently and also within the partnership, right? But what I've noticed is that once a woman decides that she is like in it, she is ready to rock her life, she is ready to make money, get hot, travel the world. She has a vision for her life. She gets like this wave of ambition, this wave of personal power, like this excitement for everything that's kind of unfolding for her. She turns to her side and wants nothing more than her partner to be along for the ride. But obviously, she doesn't wanna, like, drag, the partner through the experience. She wants to see that the partner is equally valuing growth and evolution in their life in the same way that she is, right? So oftentimes there's this kind of like mismatch that ends up happening. I often talk about like having mutual core values, right? And so for many of us, really genuinely valuing growth and evolution in our life is incredibly important. It's part of your core values. It's something that's important to you. Like I feel like a growth mindset is really important in a man, any man that I date, someone who's growth oriented, who wants to continue to grow and improve and progress through life. Like I wouldn't be okay having a partner who like, feels like he peaks, in his mid 20s, 30s, boom, done. And he's done like growing and exploring, like exploration, curiosity, like all of these things are things that I value, right? So if you find yourself in a partnership where your values are actually different from one another, especially if they've evolved in such a way after a significant amount of time, because we're not machines, we change and evolve and grow. And when you're with someone for a very long time, I often say like, how much pressure are you putting yourself through to say that you are the same people that you were 20 years ago when you first met, when you first connected? So it's really normal to kind of feel this energy of, outgrowing a partnership when you as an individual are all about like making your life better. All right. Now let's talk about what to do about that. I think this is probably the best way we can kind of put this in the frame of all different relationships, but specifically, let's talk about dating and relationship first. When you have with every kind of outgrowing any relationship, you're going to go through three different steps. The first is going, or you have different, two different steps, we'll say, two different pathways. That's how I want to phrase it. Two different pathways. The first pathway is if you feel complete, you feel complete. Like I'm a very big believer that sometimes we stay in situations longer than we have to because of the fact that we feel this obligation, the sense of like loyalty, essentially, towards the person because of the amount of time or the history that we have spent with them. But I have met many people and have also myself been in situations where there was no question about it. Like my body, like my mind, my heart, everything was like, nope, this chapter is complete. Like there is nothing more here. And any time that I've dragged it on has been out of fear of what's going to happen on the other side of me not taking action. So I think it's important to note that I am somebody that will always give you permission if you feel like you need the permission to evolve and set yourself free, to set yourself free. Because I do believe that chapters come to an end, that life is made of chapters, especially love, especially chapters that are like really long. You've been together for so long. I help so many of my clients kind of rediscover themselves, who they are in their 30s and 40s after being with someone for 10, 20 years, because the last version of yourself single was when you were 17 years old, like you're a woman now. There's a whole new thing. So if you feel, this is important, if you feel that the chapter is done, that it's over, that you've outgrown it for good, you get to give yourself permission to let it go. And it gets to also close with love, which I think is important. I was talking to a client about this literally the other day, that it doesn't need to come from a place of anger, frustration, or resentment even, but more so from a place like, I love you so much. Like, we get to honor the journey that we've been on thus far. And like out of love and mutual respect for one another, give each other the space to grow and evolve individually, because that happens. And a lot of times, like you'll end up being friends more than you are partners or lovers, right? And I think that's important. And, I might eventually do kind of a whole separate, maybe we'll do like a breakup episode. Let me know if you want me to do like a breakup episode specifically on navigating the actual breakup and then also the healing and exploration after. I feel like that might be a really good episode. So I definitely think that there's always going to be an opportunity to feel complete. Okay. Now, this is definitely usually my path because this is how I am, how I live. However, there have also been times, right? And I know this also having worked with a lot of clients who have been in long-term partnership. There's children, like the conversation is a little bit more intertwined and they're actually not ready. They don't feel complete. They don't feel like they don't, they're done loving their partner. They feel very much still in love. They just feel this dissonance. They feel this disconnect, right? And it's hard because in that moment, when you feel this, you feel that very, deeply, but you also feel the pull and the desire to want to actually evolve and grow as a person. And in that moment, that fork in the road, the moment you choose your relationship out of fear, right? You just decide to dim your light, to stop your growth, like stunt your growth or whatever, out of fear that the relationship will end, out of fear of hurting your partner, out of fear of abandonment, whatever all of the fears are, you are self-abandoning, right? You are breaking the relationship with yourself. So we don't want that. So if you want to salvage the relationship, the romantic relationship, then you move into this next this is the second pathway. There's a two steps. That's it. There's two steps to this pathway. Okay. So pathway one, you close the chapter and you go. Pathway two, you decide to stay. Two steps. First step is a conversation. And this is usually the scary part because, that means that you have to, number one, radically own yourself, your desires, your vision, your hopes, your dreams, and also, bring forth something that could potentially hurt someone that you really care about or potentially put the relationship at risk, right? Or worse, shine light on the fact that you've actually outgrown the relationship. You're no longer aligned, and it is actually time to break up. So there's that fear around like actually having the conversation. And that's why I said at the beginning, if this is resonating, you're very likely like in avoidance. You're sweeping under the rug. You're hoping things get better on their own, but they're not going to, right? Because usually the growth is in the stretch. That's the magic of it. So the first step is a conversation. It's a conversation of sharing exactly how you feel. And most importantly, what's important to you moving forward, the vision for your life. Then comes the invitation to rise. You invite your partner to rise into this new vision, right? Of what's possible for them, because obviously you want this as well for them. Of course, right? Sovereignty, having them and giving them the opportunity to choose this for themselves, meaning you're not guilt tripping, you're not giving ultimatums, you're not nagging about it, you're inviting, you're saying, hey, this is what's available for us, for me, but for us as a couple, as a relationship, but also for you as a person, as an individual. Now, this is where the value part really comes in. If they're not someone who values growth and evolution, that might not necessarily spark the, excitement or inspire them to grow and evolve. But the reality is that if you plan to be with someone for the rest of your life, that means you are committing to all the different versions of each other, of yourselves, that you will be within that partnership. So there has to be, again, like this kind of growing apart, but then choosing to come back together, which then leads to step two, which is the recommitment, right? The recommitment is once you've had this conversation of saying, hey, this is what's feeling out of alignment. This is where I want to go. This is what I think is available to us, right? This is what really excites me. This is what I value. This is what I hope for us and for you. And like, feels like a new adventure for us to explore, right? And your partner is like, yeah, I'm in. I'm fucking in for the ride. Let's do this, right? Like empowered from an excited place, right? Then there's a recommitment of what does it actually look like for your relationship moving forward. Sometimes I've had couples, have these conversations with each other and then just leave it open-ended and nothing changes. You want to be able to attach actions and actionable kind of next steps, right? For not just each other, but also just the relationship dynamic and yourselves as individual. Like, what do you get to do now for you yourself, right? On your own individual path. So there's a recommitment. There is a choice of coming back together, of doing life together, of embarking on this next chapter together, right? Now, this is scary because of the fact that not every conversation is going to lead to a recommitment. And being willing to have the conversation oftentimes means being willing to potentially risk the conversation going the opposite way, which is, you know what? I don't want to come on that journey with you. I don't feel like that's aligned. That doesn't excite me. Or, feeling maybe in a more, or we'll say a less mature conversation, feeling like you are shamed almost for wanting something different. Like that kind of a conversation could potentially happen, right? Depending on your relationship and the state of mind that your partner is in at the time as well, right? Or state of their life. That is something that you run the risk of, right? In that moment, you will come to that fork in the road where you have to decide if you're going to choose yourself, right, and risk it all and go into the unknown and go into, a life where you're now getting to know yourself as single again after a very long time, or if you are going to dim those desires and keep yourself in the state. Maybe that's what makes you happy. Maybe the love, the relationship matters more to you. I'm not going to pass judgment, but I think you know what I'll say about that. All right. I'll be here on the other side of that decision. However, you do come to that fork in the road and you do have to decide, make that decision for yourself. All right. Now, what I don't want you to do and what's important for you to recognize is that you will come to this moment of activation for your life, for your growth, for your bank account, for your hotness, for your adventures, all of the things that really excite you. All right. But you'll be too afraid to bring this conversation to your partner out of all the fears of what could potentially happen. And what will end up happening is you will keep yourself in like this limbo, in this void of absolute suffering. So we often talk about the void of uncertainty, the fear of the unknown. This is like a void of indecision. This is a void of I'm too chicken shit to have big girl talks, right? And so I'm going to instead pretend like this isn't nagging at me and I'm going to avoid it. I'm going to escape it just so I can keep everything nice and tidy and safe. Now, you could do that, but I don't know how long you could actually do it until, your heart, your soul kind of bursts out and says enough is fucking enough. And then you start a love affair with the fucking gardener because that's what ends up happening when you don't tune into like your inner truth, right? And this show is all about you being bold. This show is all about you radically owning your life, your desires as an individual, right? And so that gets to happen within a partnership, and that needs to be safe within a partnership because you are not in a healthy relationship if that doesn't emerge in that way. Now, let's move into the second type of relationship that you might have outgrown is your friendships. All right. This happens often, especially for those of us that have friendships that date, maybe towards high school, maybe you've been friends for a very long time. This happened for me multiple stages of my life because my life has accelerated rather quickly and not just in terms of like upwards, but my life has also expanded outwards very quickly. So I move through my life very quickly, meaning things change quickly, right? And I've had friendships that have not been able to keep up. And it's been incredibly challenging and heartbreaking, right? Because the first step, the first alternative was to pretend like that wasn't a thing, right? And I would navigate, for example, when I left 9 to 5 and I started on being an entrepreneur, like my life became so radically different than so many of my friends. And of course, at the beginning and the outer layer of it, because you love each other and you care, there's this like holding space for, your experience, right? But then you start to kind of notice that you can't necessarily relate to things. You want to talk about things and they relate on like an outer layer, but aren't able to go maybe deeper in a way that you feel you want to feel met, right? You want to feel seen and met in something that is an incredibly big part of your life right now, but they're not really able to get it. Or maybe the conflict is happening a little bit more superficially. Like it could be that, you are now an entrepreneur and you have the freedom of time, which is why we all start working for ourselves, right? And you're able to travel. Maybe you're nomadic. Maybe you want to travel and go on adventures, right? And so it's so much more easy for an entrepreneur to set travel time than it is for someone in corporate. And, this isn't judgment. It's just a very different way of life. So there's going to you might, not necessarily in all situations, right? But there might be situations where it's not as easy to navigate this, like, well, I want to go, I can go this week and I have this freedom. Well, I don't. I only have a designated amount of time off, etc. So you're going to find this little dissonance that comes up. Also, we just outgrow very similarly to relationships and romantic relationships. You might start to value things differently. You might start to value growth and evolution and want to experience more growth oriented activities, and your friends might still be stuck in the partying phase or may not necessarily have any interest in it at all. Or you might pick up a desire to travel and explore. Like you might start to really value curiosity and adventure. Whereas your friends might be entering a state or a phase of their life that is more about stability and community and like rooting down, into their small town or whatever that is. So it's okay to outgrow relationships. Now, outgrowing relationships, especially when they're healthy relationships, doesn't necessarily mean you have to end a relationship. Like I'm about ending really friendships. Let me rephrase friendships. I'm about ending friendships when there's toxicity, when there's energy, like vampiric energy, like we talked about this, right? Like I'm about the same energy of being like, look, when a chapter ends, it ends, right? I've had incredible friendships that were incredible for the first 20 years. Year 21, 22 went to absolute shit. And it was like, this is done. This is complete. There's no more coming back after this, right? That gets to be okay. Chapters closed. But the reality is that in most friendships just get to evolve in a way that like you get to create space so that you can, enjoy and grow and maybe make new connections where you feel seen in those areas that you now value. But you get to also retain the connections, right? So you have the kind of friends that you can talk to, you know, every month or see them every few months instead. You don't necessarily have to talk to them every day, but that gets to be okay. So that is really giving yourself permission to not, judge the friendship for its evolution. Also knowing that the love and unconditional love gets to stay strong while you also go and connect with, humans, with people, with new friends that are a bit better matched to who you are becoming because you deserve that. And friendships are incredibly important. We'll talk a little bit about the qualities and why it's important, but it's incredibly important for you and your path of growth and evolution because you are very likely not the same girl. I'm definitely not the 16-year-old girl who did drugs and, ran around. Actually, I didn't do drugs until a little later. So let's make sure that that's clear. But I definitely partied. This is a very different version of me. So I had friends back then that I lived very differently with. Do I love them as humans? Super. I definitely do. Definitely still love them as humans. When they invite me out to a party, to go hang out for the night, and I'm mostly sober at this time of my life, like can sometimes have a drink or two. I could explore, I'll dabble, but like I'm definitely not going out and partying and raging. It's a mismatch, right? And so that's okay for our relationship or our friendship to evolve. All right. Now, the third relationship that might be feeling like you've outgrown, especially if you're an entrepreneur, is anything related to like peer groups or mentorship. Now, this is something that happens, especially if you are like on the fast track in your growth. And this is why it's also really important if that is the kind of person you are, if you are someone who accelerates, that collapses time, that moves quickly in her growth, who wants to take big leaps in her business, having mentorship that has the space for that growth and evolution is incredibly important. Oftentimes, we will find a mentor that will be a match to where we are in that moment. And for many people, for many women in business, that's fine. That's great. That's perfect, right? Because you get exactly what you need in the time. However, it's, if you're somebody who wants to skyrocket and you are someone who chooses to move very quickly in her growth, you're going to be outgrowing that mentor very, very fast. Now, if you want to jump from mentor to mentor to mentor, totally fine. My recommendation is work very in short bursts, right? Like do small containers, do like month-long containers, do accelerators, do like intensives. Like I offer, for example, 4-week intensives with me. I also offer working with me for the year because I am the kind of mentor that has this space for your growth. That's literally everything that I do and teach, right? And that I have also experienced in my life. However, I also create space. Like if that's not even big enough, you can still just do a month with me and test that out and see how you feel and see how you can expand. But don't overcommit, right? Oftentimes, and I remember this happening actually with my very first mentor. I'll tell you the story very, very quickly. I joined his mastermind, which was, as you guys know, this massive investment, but I grew really quickly. It was a mastermind, it was a group kind of scenario. And I made a lot of money very quick. My first week with my business, I made like 20K in 72 hours. I made 6 figures in less than 6 months. So when it came time and I was realizing that I had like kind of outgrew a lot of the people in my mastermind. A lot of the conversations were kind of like below the 6-figure mark, but I had already reached that. And although of course I was still getting some value from the conversations because I was still new and I was learning and everything, I wasn't feeling stretched and activated. So what I did, and this is the perfect example, is that I went to my mentor at the time and I said, look, and I had the conversation. Step one, that's the path, because I'm not someone who's just going to break a contract and say, this is done. I've outgrown you. I went and I had a conversation and said, look, this is how I'm feeling. I'm feeling like I can go very, very big. And I feel this energy. I feel like it's possible. I feel the potential. I know that I'm capable of something great, right? Like I just need the space to be able to do it. And I don't feel like I can grow within the mastermind that I'm in. And he said to me, goes, you're absolutely right. You have moved so quick. Let's take the rest of your contract and convert it into a one-on-one container so that you can get more like individual, support, and like we can take you, you can have the space to go as big as you want. And that was exactly what I needed to hear, which I did. I did over 400, I think I did 450K in sales, like out of this world, out of this at the end of that second year, $450,000 in sales because I had the space. I got to play. I got to be crazy, all of that. So it was a perfect example. We had the conversation and then we had the recommitment. And that was beautiful for us. Amazing mentorship. We finished with so much like magic and great and gratitude. And it was really powerful. So what to do about that is being able to, number one, have the conversation, right? If there's an opportunity for you to evolve within the container, sometimes it might also mean you have to up your investment, and that's okay, right? To go into maybe the next tier, whatever it is. But give yourself the permission to go bigger if you feel that. Don't keep yourself small just because that was the initial agreement. Like if you are capable of going bigger, same thing. Same thing with your peer space, right? Let's say you're in a mastermind or a group and it's not giving you the kind of like life, it's not activating you in the kind of way that you want to be activated. Get yourself in a room with people with conversations that inspire you and activate you. Get yourself in a space where you can actually grow and go bigger. So all of this is really permission to evolve. There's nothing wrong with feeling like you've outgrown any of these relationships, by the way. However, there's no reason to stay small and stay in them, right? As an honor system situation, there's always a way to pivot through, right? And evolve through that in a way that serves both parties and honors them, because you always want to think about, them on the other side as well. And they get to have the friendships and clients and romantic relationships that are a match to where they're at and aligned with what they value, right? So let's talk about if this is something that you value, if you value growth and evolution, let's talk quickly about the 5 qualities I want you to get really good at seeking out in relationships, in romantic relationships, in friendships, in peer groups, in mentorship, whatever it is. I want you to get really, really good at this, all right? The first one is the relationship should feel nourishing. It should feel like home. There should feel an element of peace for you where you can be in your truth. Whatever the actual container is, the real you needs to feel safe to exist. So there's no fear of outshining. There's no fear of outgrowing. There's no fear of, there's no hiding. There's no need to hide the version of you that wants to grow and go big and all of this. Whatever the relationship is, feeling like you are safe in that relationship, feeling like that friendship, that mentorship, you could be the truth of who you are, right? Whether it's the good, the bad, the ugly, all of it, judgment free. Have this as a nurturing, peaceful place for you. Because when you're in this state, this is where the magic happens. This is where the evolution gets to happen, right? You get to evolve when you feel safe to. And again, as an individual who values growth and evolution, this should be of the utmost priority. All right. Number 2 is your relationships. This is something to look for. Should be inspiring, they should be exciting, and they should bring out the best in you. Now, these are the kind of friendships, relationships, mentorship containers, etc., that bring you to life, that you feel like the best version of you, the hopeful, the optimistic, the let's do this, the loving, the nurturing, the present version of you, the version of you that is like plugged in, right? Is allowed to emerge, right? Safely. And you can find this in relationships, you can find this in friendships. Like, I have some girlfriends who inspire the fuck out of me. Like, I sit beside them as they tell me their vision, they tell me what they've been working on. I have clients, by the way, who inspire and excite me and bring out the best version of me as a mentor, right? I have had mentors that have, like, excited me, that have stretched my idea of what was possible. You want the kind of relationships that inspire and light that spark in you, all right? Regardless of it, of anything, because that's going to give you ideas, that's going to give you inspiration and motivation to bring your life to the next level, all right? Number 3, okay, relationships that challenge you to grow. Now, obviously, you have the, really outer surface of the relationship where you have someone say, "Hey, I know you're capable of this. You got this. Go do this." All your relationships, all the people that really matter in your life should believe in you. I believe that's an incredibly important prerequisite to, like, being in my life. Believe in who I am and believe in what I'm capable of. Right? However, you will find, and I believe this, that a lot of our growth comes from conflict. It comes from confrontation. It comes from people being brutally honest in the most loving way, right? And challenging me to rise to a better version of myself. If you are someone who values growth and evolution, that means that it doesn't only come from the inspirational, girl, you got this vibe. It comes from, you're better than this. You can do better. You get to do better, right? And being invited to rise into a better version of yourself. Now, I've had mentors who have challenged me, said, you can go bigger. Why are you playing this small? Right? Who have literally, and that's what I do to my clients as well. It's like a loving challenge to grow. Also, being in relationships, romantic relationships, where I have sat in front of someone who I may have like hurt without obviously intending to, right? But who I may have hurt, me having to navigate the feeling of like I get to grow and be better and fix this, right? And improve in this. So relationships, friendships, also women that you feel you can trust, that can create the space to be like, hey, what you did really hurt me, or hey, like, I think that this could have gone in a better way. These are the most valuable relationships for someone who values growth and evolution. All right. Number 4 is relationships that help you enjoy more of life. All of this, we take life so fucking seriously, especially me when I'm like super aggressive about things, but it's just life. I often say, and then we just die. So you should be seeking out relationships. You should be seeking out friendships, romantic relationships, mentorships, peer groups that make you like feel comfortable in just having fun, that inspire you to have fun, to experience things that you've never done. The kind of friendships that are saying, hey, let's do something new. Let's meet a new version of ourselves. Let's try something we've never done. Let's do it together. Like, or let's do this thing I know you don't want to necessarily try, but let's do it. I know you're going to love it. This is what life is all about. Like, let's not forget the fucking point, right? So relationships that have you experience and enjoy more of life. And lastly, last quality you should be looking for in relationships, friendships, and mentorship, etc., are relationships that help you deepen the relationship that you have with yourself. Meaning that when you spend time together, when you have conversations, when you have conflict, right, or altercations, you're able to take that and you feel like you can bring it in and reflect and allow that to connect you more deeply with who you are, what you value, and what you want to create in your life. Having the opportunity, relationships that reflect versions of you back that can kind of hold you to your power, that allows you to come home to yourself. These are the relationships that you want to have in your life. So if you're feeling like you've outgrown the relationships in your life, it could be that the chapter is over, but it could also be that a conversation and a recommitment gets to happen. So I hope today's episode was exactly what you needed to hear. Thank you for tuning in, and I will see you in the next episode of the show.